Yes, I went there. I'm ashamed of myself for using the words preventing injuries in the title. So let me set the record straight. This is one method to help you reduce the risk of injuries as a fighter. The reason we can't use the term preventing injuries is because there are always freak accidents that happen, like maybe the guy at your Muay Thai gym who thinks he's Tikaru, liver kicking Steve who's there just trying to lose weight. But outside of that, there are actionable steps that you can take to help reduce your risk of injury and keep you on the mats, in the ring, or in the cage. And one of them is this cool muscle architecture adaptation, which is increasing muscle fascicle length. Now, I've talked about this at length on the podcast. I've even done a video covering a lot of this with actionable training footage, and I'll link that at the end of this video for you as well, so you can go deeper down this rabbit hole. But what about increasing muscle fascicle length helps you as a fighter stay injury-free? And how do you train to elicit this adaptation? It comes down to the length-tension relationship of muscle. If you're not familiar, the length-tension relationship refers to the muscle's ability to generate force at differing muscle lengths. A muscle contracts when two protein filaments overlap and bind, and these are known as actin and myosin. It's known as the sliding filament theory. Actin filaments slide back and forth depending on if the muscle's lengthening or shortening, which creates more or less overlap. A very easy example is just using my fingers here. For example, you have more overlap, less overlap. So a lengthening muscle and then a shortened muscle. That's a very easy way to visualize it. The more you have overlapped to an extent, because you can go too far, the more cross bridges that can be formed, and therefore the more force that can be generated. For example, I can have more cross bridges formed in the muscle if I have this versus this. So this would be a lengthened position. This would be, say, like an optimal length position. You can go too far with that overlap like this, and you can't get as many cross bridges as like being in that lengthened position. I'm gonna pop up a graph of the length-tension relationship here as well, and you can see that there's a position that corresponds to the greatest peak torque. This would be considered the quote-unquote optimal length, as you have the maximum crossover of these actin and myosin for maximum cross bridging and maximum force generation, as you can see in the graph. It simply represents, in layman's terms, the point where you can generate maximum force at that specific joint angle. Now, the problem occurs when this peak torque on the graph occurs at joint angles that are much lower down the graph. And it's a problem because muscle injuries typically occur when the muscle is lengthening, where the muscle is asked to produce more force than it's capable of. A simple example is the hamstring strain when sprinting, probably one of the most common muscle injuries. The forces exceed the capability of the hamstrings at that muscle length. Now, by increasing muscle fascicle length, which is simply just adding blocks of muscle fibers in a row. So when I talked about those protein filaments, we're just adding blocks of those in a row, increasing the length of the muscle fascicle and the muscle fibers. We actually shift this length-tension relationship up and to the right, and you'll see that on the same graph that I'm putting up here. By shifting it up and to the right, we have now shifted the angle which we can produce peak torque. So now we're producing high levels of force at longer muscle lengths. This allows us to reduce our risk of injury when we get into potentially precarious positions, which often happens when grappling and other various activities. So how do we do this? How do we structure our training to shift this length-tension relationship up and to the right, so we're not having these quote-unquote shortened muscles that can only produce their highest force at shorter muscle lengths? Well, there's a couple of good papers, so I'm just gonna check my computer for this because I've got my notes here. But Blazevich in 2003, they had the sprint and jump group increasing muscle fascicle length, while the strength group did not. We have Ramirez de la Cruz, their meta-analysis showing increased fascicle length from plyometric training. So plyometrics is one. Eccentric only hamstring training increased fascicle length greater than concentric only after only 6 weeks of training. That's by Timmons and his colleagues in 2016. And then one by my academic supervisor, eccentric training shifts the length-tension relationship up and to the right, as shown in the graph that I've been showing you on this video. And that's in 2010. So here are some of the actionable exercises that you can use in your training to help elicit this adaptation. So the first one, we talked about eccentric training, eccentric overload. So often we think of eccentric overload as supramaximal, say squatting and benching. So taking the traditional lifts, typically adding more than your 1 RM on there and lowering it down. Now, the only issue with this is you need to be really well trained to be able to do these safely, and you need either special equipment or a lot of spotters. So there are severe limitations to using these exercises to do eccentric overload. Plus they're very, very fatiguing, and you're gonna put yourself in a hole for a few days, which is one of the issues with them. But there are safer and easier methods to use. For example, 2 up, 1 down machine exercises, leg curls, leg extensions, even leg press. These can get you the overload because you're using a load on the way down that you can only push with 2 legs, so you're resisting with the 1 leg on the way down. You have flywheels if you have access to a flywheel, where you can delay the braking action to either overload peak eccentric force in the bottom or the top range. You have faster eccentrics. These could be altitude drops, dropping into a push-up position. You can even use negatives on a pull-up where you use a weight belt, jump up, or have the box high enough and then lower yourself down with a weight that you can't do a pull-up with. You can even use more advanced options like eccentric quasi-isometrics, which I've also covered in a previous video, where you're holding an isometric, for example, in the mid-range, and you're just going, as you fail, you lengthen. So essentially it's just an isometric to failure. These are just some examples that you can use within your training. And if you're very advanced, there are drop catch variations as well, such as drop catch Romanian deadlifts, staggered stance Romanian deadlifts, drop catch inverted rows, lots of different options. The second option are long muscle length isometrics. This is a little more theoretical, but there's research that seems to align with this with similar modalities. Then I covered this in the previous video I did on long muscle length isometrics for increasing muscle fascicle length, and I'll link that at the end of this video as well. But the idea is you're holding these long muscle length isometrics for long periods of time. You're either accumulating volume or you're going extreme to failure. And the reason you're doing this is because there is research showing that holding static stretching, chronic static stretching, so long periods for many weeks, increases muscle fascicle length. So if you're able to increase the intensity of the stretch, then potentially you're able to also gain these increases in muscle fascicle length instead of having to do so much volume. So for example, you might do an isometric split squat and have your legs as far, apart as possible, and you're trying to pull your legs together while they stay there, and you're essentially holding that until failure, or accumulating, say, multiple sets of 1 or 2 minutes. These are really damn hard. You can do them with the upper body in the push-up position, same thing. You can do them with side bend variations. You can do it with rotational variations. Those are all in the video I'll link at the end too. A third method is obviously your plyometrics. Now, if you're a combat athlete, you should be doing plyometric training within your training programs regardless anyway, but to give you some options in this video, you can go from extensive or submaximal plyometrics all the way through to more intensive plyometric variations. If you're newer to plyometric training, do not start doing drop jumps, maximal hurdle hops, etc., because you're gonna blow your Achilles up like nothing and it's gonna hurt. So start with easier plyometric variations. You can build volume of the submaximal work and still get great gains in the ability to use elastic energy as you will with the intense variations. So jumping rope is probably the most rudimentary example that most of you are likely doing as combat athletes. You can do things like that. You can do multi-directional jumps like you're jumping rope but without the rope, going in different directions, single leg, double leg, and then you can work your way up to maybe tuck jumps, jumping over things and trying to keep that ground contact time very short. For the upper body, you can do the same thing. You can do explosive push-ups, drop catch, inverted rows, various plyometric push-up variations, even medicine ball work if you have a partner. So it's these types of training modalities that can help you stimulate this muscle adaptation, which is going to help you reduce the risk of injury. The great side effect of this adaptation as well is you become faster. Longer muscle fascicles contract faster, so you're able to develop or maintain speed as you go through your training. If you want to see more of some of this training in action, and you want to go a deep dive into using long muscle length isometrics to facilitate this adaptation, check out this video I've got for you next as I dive deep into some unique exercises you can use straight into your training.